The ocean stretched endlessly before the great whale shark, its massive form slicing through the water with an unhurried grace. Beneath a vast expanse of blue, the shark's skin, speckled with the light of the distant sun, glowed like a living constellation. The ocean, both her home and her canvas, was a place where time seemed to bend and stretch, where the rhythms of life pulsed beneath its surface. For years, the whale shark had roamed these waters, tracing the same currents and tides, following the invisible paths laid out by the ancestors of her kind. But something had changed. The water around her, which once felt comforting and familiar, now seemed strange, as if something beyond her understanding was pulling at the currents, subtly shifting them. She could sense it in the air, the currents, even in the echoing silence that enveloped her. She had crossed the coral reefs, where vibrant fish darted in and out of the colorful coral, where the reefs themselves seemed to hum with life. She had passed mangrove forests, their tangled roots threading through the clear, shallow waters, and had come close enough to feel the rhythm of the far-off shorelines. Yet today, the waters felt different, colder, quieter, more distant. As she glided deeper into the open ocean, a heavy, almost oppressive silence settled over the water. The usual hum of life, the passing schools of fish, the playful dolphins that occasionally swam alongside her, the distant calls of the deep, was absent. Instead, an unsettling stillness hung in the water, like the moment before a storm. The whale shark swam on, her massive body moving with an effortless rhythm. Yet as she ventured farther, the stillness deepened. The faint creak of a distant current could barely be heard, and the occasional flicker of light from the surface seemed like the last echoes of a world that was rapidly slipping away. In the depths, she noticed something. It was a dark shape, something out of place. She veered toward it cautiously, her instincts alert. As she approached, the shape revealed itself, an enormous school of fish, lifeless and floating aimlessly in the water. Something had disturbed them, some unseen force that caused them to lose their direction and drift into the depths. The whale shark's senses prickled with unease. Curiosity mingled with caution. She moved around the school, her massive body casting long shadows over the eerie spectacle. The fish, once vibrant and full of life, now seemed hollow, empty. The water around her grew colder still, and a strange, heavy feeling pressed on her chest. The shark turned away, continuing her journey, but now the path ahead felt even more uncertain. She swam on through the layers of the ocean, through the deep trenches where the sunlight barely touched, past the wreckage of forgotten ships, and into the quiet, endless expanse where even the most daring creatures dared not venture. Hours passed, but the stillness remained, unbroken and unnerving. Yet, as the shark swam deeper, something shifted. A flicker of movement caught her attention. Her body froze instinctively, and she turned toward the source. There, far below, something immense stirred in the water. A shadow, a presence that seemed to pulse with energy. Her instincts screamed at her to turn back, but she couldn't. Something pulled her toward it, a force far greater than her own curiosity. Slowly she descended, her movements careful and deliberate, like an ancient creature who had known these waters for centuries. As she neared the shape, it resolved into something far larger than any creature she had encountered. A massive, dark shape, its outline barely visible in the murky depths. It was a creature of unimaginable size, a predator whose presence filled the very water around it. The whale shark stopped in her tracks, her heart pounding in her chest. This was not an ordinary creature. It was ancient, a relic of the deep that should not have existed in these waters. The presence of this beast, the sheer suffocating weight of its being, pressed in from all sides. It was like a force of nature itself, inescapable and overwhelming. For a long moment, the two creatures remained locked in an unspoken standoff, suspended in the cold, still water. The whale shark had faced danger before, but never like this. The predator before her was not one of hunger, it was one of power, a creature whose very existence seemed to bend the ocean around it. And then, in a flash, the creature moved. It wasn't fast, it wasn't a chase, but the shark felt it immediately. The water shifted, its movement slow and deliberate, like the turning of an ancient wheel. The predator, impossibly vast, seemed to bend the very space around it, like a gravitational force pulling everything toward its core. The whale shark, despite her immense size, found herself powerless against it. She tried to swim away, but the current, the force, was too strong. The world seemed to collapse inward, as though the very ocean itself was a living, breathing entity closing in on her from all sides. Just as it seemed as though the shark would be swallowed by the depths, a sudden shift in the water broke the tension. Something else had entered the scene, another presence, powerful and ancient. The predator's immense body shifted, its focus now elsewhere. The whale shark took her chance, swimming quickly, desperately toward the surface. Her body, heavy with the weight of the ocean's pressure, pushed her toward the light above. As the water lightened, and the world slowly began to open up again. When she broke the surface, the sun was setting, casting an amber glow over the water. She took a long, deep breath, filling her lungs with the sweet, salty air. The predator, whatever it had been, had vanished into the depths. But the shark knew one thing for certain: the ocean was not what it seemed. It had depths beyond imagination, forces beyond comprehension, and somewhere, in its vast, dark expanse, things far older and more dangerous than any creature she had encountered lurked, waiting for the moment to reveal themselves once again. As the sun sank below the horizon, the whale shark swam on, uncertain of what lay ahead, but knowing that the journey, her journey, was far from over. The ocean was full of secrets, and she had only begun to uncover them. Ending twist. The whale shark, in her moment of escape, unwittingly disturbed the delicate balance of the deep. The predator, still lurking beneath the waves, would soon return. An ancient force awakened, waiting for its turn. The water around the shark felt darker now, as if the ocean had absorbed a portion of her own fear and uncertainty, storing it for some unknown future moment. As the whale shark swam onward, the comforting warmth of the sun's final rays on the surface felt like a fleeting promise of safety. Her body, exhausted from the struggle, moved with a rhythmic grace despite the tension still coiled in her bones. The ocean was vast, and yet something about the space she traversed now seemed different, like a distant thunderstorm that hadn't yet arrived, but its presence was already felt in the air. She navigated toward familiar waters, past the scattered coral reefs and over the undulating seaweed forests. This was her domain, a place where she could lose herself in the soft current, where the pulse of life was constant, never too far from the surface. But the ocean's pulse had changed, the sounds too. Those gentle sways of distant life were quieter now. As she moved deeper into the waters she had once called her sanctuary, she realized that the shadows beneath her were no longer as they had been. The coral seemed less vibrant. The fish she passed, once alive with color, now moved with erratic precision, as if they, too, sensed the encroaching shift. The predator she had encountered was not far behind. Her instincts, honed over eons of evolution, tugged at her. She turned slightly, glancing over her massive back. The water felt heavier now, colder, pressing against her body with a weight she hadn't felt before. The distant currents she had relied upon to guide her now seemed to pull her toward a dark, unfamiliar direction. As she swam, a shadow caught her eye. It wasn't the fleeting flicker of a fish or the glide of a ray. No, this was a dark, slow-moving shape that seemed to absorb the surrounding light. The shark's muscles tensed. It was huge, a form so immense that its size dwarfed even the mighty whale shark. It was the predator. The shark felt it draw closer, its presence a creeping force that seemed to distort the very water around it. She moved faster now, but the currents didn't seem to carry her as they had before. Her movements became erratic, her senses overwhelmed by the depth of the encroaching darkness. It was as if the ocean itself had been holding its breath, waiting for this moment. The surface, so close just moments ago, seemed a distant, unreachable realm. Her vast body swam desperately toward the shallows, hoping to find refuge among the reefs where the shadows of the deep could no longer follow. But the predator, so ancient, so still, was never far behind. With each movement, she felt its presence drawing nearer, encircling her in a force too powerful to escape. In a final attempt to break free, the whale shark surged toward a break in the reef, a narrow gap in the coral, where the water rushed through in an almost violent current. If she could just reach it, the powerful flow might allow her to slip through, to leave the predator behind. But as she pushed forward, something stopped her. Something unseen, but undeniably real. The water ahead shimmered with an unnatural stillness, a subtle resistance that seemed to stretch her forward motion, slowing her every stroke. Suddenly, the predator surged from the depths, its massive form breaking through the water with terrifying force. It moved with a speed that defied its size, a shadow so vast it seemed to swallow the light. The whale shark collided with the dark force, her body flung violently to the side. The ocean around her pulsed with a heavy thrum, as though the very world was shaking under the weight of this ancient encounter. And then, as quickly as it had emerged, the predator disappeared, vanishing into the depths, as if the ocean had swallowed it whole. The whale shark floated in stunned silence, her mind racing with confusion and fear. She had never encountered anything like this before. But the predator's brief appearance had not been random. It had come for a purpose tied to the deep, forgotten secrets of the ocean. And in the depths there were forces, old, unknowable forces that lived far beyond her understanding. As the water stilled once again, the whale shark realized with a deep, sinking certainty that something fundamental had shifted within the ocean. The predator was no mere creature. It was a harbinger, a signal that the balance of life in these waters was teetering on the edge of something catastrophic. The deep was calling. And now, the ocean itself seemed to acknowledge that it was no longer hers to rule alone. With no answers, only an overwhelming sense of urgency, the whale shark moved slowly toward the surface. But she did not swim alone. The shadows followed, silent, unseen, but always present, like a distant heartbeat. As she rose, she caught a glimpse of the distant sky, stars now twinkling in the velvet blackness above. The world above the surface still seemed untouched by the chaos below. For now, the ocean's surface remained serene, but beneath, there was a growing darkness that could no longer be ignored. And as the whale shark breached the water's surface once more, the full scope of the mystery began to unfold. The predator and the power it had unleashed was not gone. It had only just begun to reveal its true purpose. And the whale shark, in her ancient wisdom, understood that the journey ahead would be unlike anything she had ever known before. The ocean was changing, and she, along with everything that called it home, was caught in the midst of it. The story of the whale shark's journey had only just begun. As the whale shark ascends, a faint, unsettling sound vibrates through the water, the faintest whisper of something stirring deep beneath the surface. It's not a predator this time, but something far older, more dangerous. something that has been waiting, lying dormant, for eons, ready to rise with the ocean's unseen tide. The whale shark swam upward, her massive body gliding through the darkening water with an unsettling sense of urgency. The deeper she descended, the colder it seemed to grow, and the more isolated she felt. The surface was within reach now, yet she knew something had shifted beneath her, like the ocean itself had bent and contorted into something unfamiliar, something beyond comprehension. As she neared the surface, the shimmering expanse of light broke through, offering a brief flicker of hope. But the sound, those faint whispers vibrating through the water, did not cease. If anything, they grew louder, like a heartbeat in the abyss. They pulsed through the water, reverberating in the bones of every creature who swam within earshot. It was as if the very current had transformed into a signal, a warning. For a moment she hesitated, suspended between the deep and the light. The surface above her beckoned, but there was something in the depths pulling at her, an ancient force she could not ignore. Her instincts told her to flee, to break free from the ocean's strange grip. But her curiosity, stronger than fear, kept her tethered to the dark water below. And then she felt it. The gentle sway of the water stilled for a moment, as though the ocean itself had held its breath. The whale shark froze, her mind racing as a strange pressure surrounded her, squeezing her from every direction. The water around her darkened as though a shadow had swept over the entire sea. The whispers now became more distinct, no longer just vibrations but almost words, a deep, resonating hum that filled the depths. The surface was too far now, the light too distant. She had fallen back into the embrace of the dark, deeper than she had ever swum before. Her large body twisted with confusion as her environment began to morph in a way that seemed unnatural. The water temperature, which had been comfortably warm, began to cool, growing cold as ice. She felt it in her very being, an unmistakable shift in the balance of nature itself. Something was moving beneath her. A shadow rose, not from the depths, but from within the water itself. An entity, an unimaginable presence, as ancient as the ocean and as vast as the seas. The very water around her began to take on a life of its own, twisting and spiraling in unnatural patterns. The whale shark's pulse quickened, her body thrashing, her once smooth, effortless movement turning desperate. She could feel the presence moving closer. Slowly, inexorably, encircling her. The water itself seemed to pulse with an eerie energy, drawing her in, pushing her deeper. It was like a magnet, pulling her into a trap she couldn't escape. Suddenly, the dark silhouette of something massive surged forward, its presence overwhelming, filling the space around her like a wave crashing through a fragile shore. It was not another predator. It was something older, something far more powerful. Her instincts screamed for her to retreat, but the cold, suffocating current held her fast, pressing her forward into the very heart of the ocean. From the depths, an ancient call rose, a sound that could not be described, a vibration so intense that it seemed to travel through her very bones. Her body shuddered in response, as though the very fabric of her being was being unraveled. It was the call of the ocean itself, a call to which all creatures were bound, a call that only the most ancient of beings could hear. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the pressure released. The whale shark shot upward, propelled by a force so strong it almost knocked the breath from her lungs. The pressure around her faded as the dark presence dissolved into the depths from which it had risen, leaving only the stillness of the water behind. She surged toward the surface, her body moving instinctively toward the light, toward the safety of the open ocean above. She broke through the surface of the water with a gasp, her massive body flinging droplets of salt water into the air as she rose higher, gasping for breath, for life. The ocean's surface, once clear and calm, now shimmered with an unsettling energy, like a storm on the horizon, ready to break. The whale shark's heart raced as she glided through the waves, her thoughts reeling. What had she encountered beneath the surface? What was the force that had pulled her into its grasp? In the distance, the dark shadow of something far larger than anything she had ever known loomed on the horizon, its presence casting an eerie pall over the water. The ocean was no longer a sanctuary. It was a place of power and danger, a realm where even the greatest of creatures could be swept away by forces beyond their control. With a heavy heart, the whale shark turned and swam toward the open ocean. She didn't know what had just happened. She didn't know what awaited her in the depths. But one thing was certain. There was no turning back now. The ocean had changed, and she, along with every other living creature, was caught in its mysterious tide. The journey had only just begun. As the whale shark swam toward the horizon, she felt the strange pull once more, but this time it wasn't from below. It was from within the ocean itself, a force that seemed to beckon her deeper still. And in the distance, she saw something, a faint, glowing light pulsing from the depths. A beacon, perhaps, or a warning. She could not ignore it, and the ocean's call resonated in her very soul. The ocean had secrets it had long kept hidden, and now the time had come to uncover them.